It's disgusting how cheap these clubs are that Jordan used to win the Masters back in 2015. Not to mention how many records he broke around that golf course with them. And if anything, they've got worse with the rule changes, route that most amateurs obviously get caught in. Oh, she is gone. Not what you want from your fairway wood, but I nearly hit it 300 yards. What's really interesting is one of the best players in the world then and now chose a set that could only be deemed somewhat a mid-handicap golf set. The best bit is you can build this whole set for around £500, apart from the putter, that is. So before we go through the bag, starting at the putter, I must stress Jordan's bag is the perfect example of finding a set that works for you and not just putting yourself in this box just because you're handicapped. Now, we're not spending much time on the flat stick, mainly because that is so personal to every player out there. But the main reason being the Scotty Cameron Prototype 009 putter is, well, rather expensive. Which is probably a good time to shout out the guys at Replay Golf for helping me build Jordan's Speith bag top to bottom. However, considering one of Jordan Spieth's records that week was the most amount of birdies for 4 rounds, 28 birdies. But unlike the rest of the bag, which I do think is great value, as well as performance in certain areas, putters are so personal. £3,000 putter is just as good as a £50 putter, depending on whose hands it's actually in. That being said, birdies are very much easier if you're getting the ball within inside 20 foot of the flag. So we probably should talk about the lower end of the bag. Jordan had SM5s in the bag, which in today's standards is now old hat, or is it? And I should probably explain why I've got these 2 different wedges as well. Wedges are all about condition, hence why manufacturers are telling you to upgrade your wedges all the time. Because if there's any club that I honestly believe has had less advancement, if anything, they've got worse with the rule changes over the years, it's, well, with wedges. As you can see, 9,300 spin off a mat with obviously a vice ball and a pretty old 52-degree SM5 wedge. And even though I honestly believe a brand new SM5 would be just as good as a brand new SM8, SM7, SM9 wedge as well, well, it's quite hard to find a brand new SM5 wedge in decent condition. And as you can see from the SM7, SM5 here from Replay, I mean, they're pretty close in price. I imagine the stamping on the back of this one hasn't necessarily helped the price of the SM7. So before we go into the irons, I should probably explain why I brought this T22 Mizuno 46-degree wedge with me. Because condition is one thing, however, the right loft and gaps is, well, a completely different kettle of fish. And this raises an extremely good point of Jordan's bag being fitted for him and not going down the route that most amateurs obviously get caught in. And back in 2015 around Augusta, he went for maximum control. And I'm going to show you, you don't need maximum control, but so many of you have such a big gap in your bag. For example, I have a stereotypical county back iron from TaylorMade, 43.5 degrees loft. And then what I would consider the normal loft that most amateurs pick for their next wedge, 52 degrees. And there's 2 ways to solve this, but let me show you the problem. Around 80 miles an hour, 82.4, not that far off. 130 yards. And then a wedge, a tiny bit slower because obviously shorter in length. No, maybe a bit too slow at 77, but you'll get the point. Only 92 yards worth of carry. However, if I got another wedge, let's say an affordable Mizuno wedge that doesn't do well in the second-hand market for whatever reason, as this is quite recent at 60 odd pounds, and I swung it at a similar clubhead speed as I did with the 52. Tiny bit fast. 81 miles an hour. Oh, there we go, 75, not that far off. The point is I've now got a gap between the 130-yard pitching wedge from my set However, I must stress, I'm not saying go and get a 46-degree wedge. I'm saying go and get a sandwich in this set, that's fine. But a sandwich, approach wedge, and these type of head styles will launch the ball very high. So if you swing quite fast and hit this 130 yards, potentially downwind, your gap wedge and your sandwich could virtually go the same distance. Versus these head styles, a lot less forgiving, but you're gonna get more spin, lower launch, higher control. For a long time, I had a Titleist AP2 pitching wedge lofted at 46 degrees, and I had a 48-degree Vokey. Why? Because there was a 12-yard gap distance between them. Pick a wedge that's going to suit your game and get a loft that's going to cover that gap between the bottom of your irons and obviously into your wedge set. Which is why Jordan only had a 9-iron in his set, no pitching wedge, and went straight to the 46 degree around Augusta as he wanted maximum control. And let's be honest, he's an outrageous ball striker. Now, we won't spend too long on the irons, as I actually rated the AP2 as one of the best value mid-handicap irons, and I actually made a mistake in that video. These are 34 degrees loft. These are actually very traditional, but at the same time, they're not a blade, and I stand by what I said. These are great for giving iron. That feel great, and I definitely should have moved the green further away, as that is absolutely flown. I should probably mention at this point why I didn't bring the 714s and I brought the 716s. And just like the wedges, a 716 iron set is going to cost the same as 714. And I feel the 716s you're going to be able to get a hold of easier in good condition. After a club's been out 8 years, no matter what it is, condition varies the price more than the technological side. This right here is arguably the most underrated club from Titleist that I've seen over the years. And the only reason I say underrated is that the price of these things are virtually nothing. I'm actually left speechless. I didn't even know what to say. Now at Augusta, Jordan was using the 915 HD, and to separate the more forgiving head to the more players controlled ones was the HD versus the H. And nowadays we have the H1 and H2, and obviously the newer ones, TS1, TS2, TS3, TS4, you get it. However, for a lot of mid-handicappers, I would just go for the 915H. Again, this thing's for like £30, £40. It's forgiving, it's slightly more offset, it's gonna launch the ball higher. Versus the more controlling, lower flighted ball flight of the HD or the H2. But maybe you like the idea of a driving iron but don't have enough club head speed, so you want something a bit more chunky, maybe loft some of these up 22 degrees. Either the 915 or, to be honest, the 818 that I have here is a great value option, and if I'm wrong, just sell it on for 50 quid. Hopping into our next choice, I couldn't help myself. Jordan actually had this club, £50 club, £40 club. I'll show you some prices in a minute. All the way up to 2020, which is actually astonishing. And I made a whole video on fairway woods and why tour pros very seldom get rid of them. As it's not really distance that they're particularly worried about, more about the dispersion, as I quite easily showed there. See, when you're going into a par 5 or potentially on a tight tee shot, an extra 10, 15 yards means absolutely nothing if your dispersion circle widens that much more. Oh, of course it didn't pick that one up. Oh, that'd be why. That's more like it. Oh, the slinger. Not what you want from your fairway wood, but I nearly hit it 300 yards. From a £50 fairway wood, ladies and gentlemen. The 915 is a very good choice. 917 is my utmost favourite. But unlike nowadays, where Titleist clubs seem to perform very well in the second-hand market, this era they didn't. And to be honest, I don't think they really perform that much different, to be honest. I'm going to do a video soon on aftermarket shafts, because at one point, the shaft that I'm holding here would have been worth more than most brand new clubs that are off the shelf nowadays. And there's no wonder why they don't perform well in the second-hand market, is that an aftermarket shaft doesn't make the ball come off the face any faster. It helps with timing, torque, launch, spin to a certain degree, but it means that shaft works well for that player with that certain head. Obviously, this one doesn't for me. The point I'm trying to make is that when you see tour pros, different tour shafts, aftermarket shaft, whatever it might be, there's certain properties in that shaft that help their individual swing, but don't necessarily feel like you're missing out, as I've had plenty of expensive shafts in my time. And to be perfectly honest, some of the best drivers that I've used are ones that I just bought secondhand and just tested and tried. Anyway, that being said, I've had 2 swings with this, so I should be warmed up now. Go on, get down there. Yeah, I'll take over 300. Now we've got the AP2s, which you could deem mid-handicap. You've got the 915F, not the FD, so obviously that's a more forgiving head style. And Jordan used the D2, not the D3, so again, the more forgiving head style. And even though my ball launched relatively high and spun a bit too much, I hit that aggressively out the toe, and I got quite a decent amount of ball speed. And let's be honest, anything over 280 and somewhat that direction, we're all going to be happy with. My point is, I am one of the worst sellers when it comes to low spin drivers, as often it's the technique that's going to play such a massive part when it comes to getting that ball further down the fairway. You never want to sacrifice distance for forgiveness, as let's be honest, this is a tough sport. And we're going to have off days, ones that don't want to necessarily come out the middle. That's why I'm a big fan of the 917 D2, a big fan of the 915 D2, and as I'll show you prices here, this thing goes literally next to nothing. Oh, she is gone. The point is, if you want a forgiving driver for around £60, it's kind of difficult to look behind this Titleist one. Guys, if you've got any questions about your golf bag or your golf game, sasgolfacademy.com. Let me know whose bag you'd like to see next.